The cultural boycott, I'm glad you asked because I left that out completely from my talk. The academic and cultural boycott, which is one of the pillars of the BDS movement. In fact, before I talk about the cultural boycott, in the academic field, we just had our first huge concrete victory this year, 2011. After many years of hard work, finally, the University of Johannesburg in South Africa, and it's important that this happened in South Africa first, the University of Johannesburg severed its links with Ben Gurion University in Israel. And that did not come easily, and that did not come quickly. It took at least 6 months of very hard work by partners in South Africa, a coalition of academics and activists, and it was supported by more than 400 top academics in South Africa, and figures such as Desmond Tutu, John Dugard, really the most prominent figures in South Africa came out in support of this University of Johannesburg severing links, and that's a case study for the BDS movement in the academic field. In the cultural field, in fact, this has been the most successful part of BDS so far in terms of its impact on Israel. Israel is alarmed at that much more than any other aspect of BDS. The economic aspect of BDS is biting, but slower. I mean, we're only 6 years old, so it will take a few more years until we really start biting, because Israel is a very strong economy, very well integrated into the Western economy, and it will take some time. Oh, you don't want to hear the answer?
I'm sorry, it's 8:30. You're
okay.
going on and on.
Oh, okay. I was planning to answer you, but anyway. Interesting. Dialogue is amazing in this country. But the cultural boycott was particularly alarming because after the flotilla attack, after May 31st, it went like this, the cultural boycott. You got the Pixies and Costello and Gil Scott-Heron and Roger Waters and Alice Walker and all those big names joined BDS after the flotilla attack. It opened people's eyes to what Israel is doing. Although in perspective, in context, the attack on the flotilla and the murder of 9 activists was much, much smaller than the attack on Gaza. But for some reason, it just opened people's eyes. And we have major writers and cultural figures supporting the boycott. In comparison with South Africa, in all fields, we're going much faster. Much, much faster than the South African boycott. If people forget, the South African boycott started in the 1950s. It started really hurting in the 1980s. It took some 25 years minimum to start making a change, to reach the trade unions, to reach the cultural figures, to reach Hollywood. Now we already have reached the ivory tower in many, many countries. At this stage of the development of BDS, we expect a lot of silent boycott. But there are some who came out publicly supporting BDS, like Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, and Alice Walker, and many, many others. Leonard Cohen did violate the boycott, unfortunately, and this was one of the most protracted campaigns in the cultural boycott field. It took us many, many months of trying to convince Leonard Cohen, because of his value among progressives and liberals and so on, to convince him not to cross our picket line. We said, you know, we understand your arguments. We understand that you think your music is so supernaturally healing and so on. I mean, I know some of you are fans of his, but I mean, some of those claims were spooky. Anyway, healing or not, you're crossing our picket line. Just like you refused to do South Africa, to do Sun City, why can't you respect our boycott? The most basic moral obligation for any self-respecting artist. And he came with a very patronizing argument, at least his agents, that, you know, this is for the best of the Palestinians. This is in your own best interest. And this adds insult to injury. For anyone to claim that they understand our interests better than us is patronizing, colonial, and racist.
They're extracting oil. Israel claims to have a large
in the sea?
Yeah.
Okay.
And apparently they found ways of extracting it now that are quite a bit cheaper.
It's disputed with Lebanon because that territory passes between the two sea borders, and it's still being disputed. It's not clear that they will be able to extract as much as they wish. And you know, never take anything from Israel without a grain of salt. They tend to exaggerate, to lie, fabricate, and I'm saying this on record. Lying is part of the government culture. They lie about everything. Just recently, many hoaxes were exposed by Israel. That hoax of the supposedly gay activist who was trying to get on the flotilla, and it turned out to be a government plot, some part of their hasbara. So I would take it with a grain of salt, anyway. Okay, the person left, but I'll still answer very quickly about that there's no humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Well, every human rights report says otherwise. Now, if Israel and its very well-oiled lobbies and the US have corrupted or co-opted any UN official to say otherwise, that's that person's problems. But I'll just quote you very briefly from the Goldstone report. Goldstone's report, in the summary, said, the destruction of food supply installations, water sanitation systems, concrete factories, and residential houses was the result of a deliberate and systematic policy to make the daily process of living and dignified living more difficult for the civilian population. Israeli forces also humiliated, dehumanized, and carried out an assault on the dignity of the people of Gaza through the use of human shields, unlawful detentions, the vandalizing of houses, graffiti on the walls, obscenities, and racist slogans. The Israeli operations were carefully planned in all their phases as a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population. Amnesty International and the UN Environmental Agency report that between 90 to 95% of the water supply of Gaza is polluted, unfit for human consumption. Imagine if 90 to 95% of the Toronto water supply was polluted. You wouldn't call that a humanitarian crisis? Many people in Gaza are very, very poor, living on less than $1 a day. They cannot buy bottled water. The only thing they can drink is polluted water that causes cancer. And Israel prevents equipment to go into, needed for purification of the water supply, needed to fix the sewage system, to separate the sewage from the water supply. They're intentionally destroying the ability of people to live in Gaza. The cancer rate is rising enormously. We're seeing new diseases that we've never heard of before. Amnesty reports about a disease that affects babies called methemoglobinemia. It's due to the rise of nitrates in the water supply. And some of its symptoms are blue hands, blue feet, sometimes the entire body is lavender blue, and babies suffer from convulsions, diarrhea, and sometimes they die. And there's no humanitarian crisis. Alberta, students want to do BDS. Yes, do read the book. That's a good step forward. And if people don't know, all my proceeds from the book are going to PACLI, the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Freedom. That's why I shamelessly promote it. So, because if you buy it, it's a support for the boycott. But I also wanted to suggest to our friends who disrupted, they may benefit as well from buying it. I mean, it's worth the $16. They may look smarter when they try to argue against BDS. But I think they may try at least. I don't know if they'll succeed, but they can try at least. Because the book has the best anti-BDS arguments out there. Because as I said, we're not getting Zionists to debate us. They're so scared. So we had to compile the best anti-BDS arguments in the book, really. The most intelligent arguments are in the book, and the refutations of them. But for students there, other than the book, bdsmovement.net is the website of the BDS movement, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to connect to local activists who are already doing the work. People like Kaya and Saya and Kwaya and others have been at it for many, many years. And I think it's best to connect to them because they know the scene in Canada much, much more than we do back in Palestine. So we have principles, guidelines, general strategies, but as far as tactics and picking what to divest from and how to do activism on campus and training, it's best to connect with other BDS activists in Canada.